The frozen body lay crumpled against the twisted trunk of a cottonwood tree, snow gathering in the folds of a tattered wool coat, and if not for the faint mist of breath rising into the bitter December air, Jacob Morrison would have ridden right past thinking it was just another casualty of the Wyoming winter of 1884. Jacob pulled hard on the reins, his bay mare snorting protest as he wheeled her around and dismounted in one swift motion. His boots crunched through the crusty snow as he approached what he now could see was a woman, her face pale as death itself, lips blue, eyes closed. She could not have been out here long or she would have been past saving, but the temperature had dropped vicious and fast when the sun went down an hour ago, and even that short time could kill. "Ma'am." His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by the wind. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" No response. Jacob dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off his thick leather gloves to press 2 fingers against her throat. The pulse fluttered there, weak and irregular but present. Thank God. He looked her over quickly, taking stock. Mid-20s maybe, dark hair matted and tangled, clothes that had once been respectable but were now threadbare and inadequate for this weather. But it was her frame that struck him most, the awful thinness of her, the way her cheekbones stood out sharp and her wrists looked like they might snap. This woman had not eaten properly in a long time. Jacob made his decision in an instant. His ranch was 3 miles back, but the line shack he used during spring roundup was less than a mile north. He could get a fire going there, get her warm, get some food into her. He scooped her up, shocked at how light she was, how little she weighed despite being a fully grown woman. She made a small sound, something between a whimper and a sigh, but did not open her eyes. "I have got you," he murmured, though he doubted she could hear him. "You are going to be all right." He managed to get her situated across his saddle, then swung up behind her, cradling her against his chest as he urged his mare into a quick walk. Running would be faster but rougher, and he did not want to jostle her too much. The wind picked up, howling through the bare branches, and he hunched over her, trying to shield her body with his own. The ride felt endless, though he knew it was only 15 minutes before the dark shape of the line shack appeared through the swirling snow. He had never been so grateful to see that rough structure. Jacob dismounted carefully, carried the woman to the door, and had to do some awkward maneuvering to get it open while still holding her. Inside was not much warmer than outside yet, but at least they were out of the wind. He laid her on the narrow cot in the corner, then moved fast. Fire first. There was wood already laid in the small stove, kindling and logs both, a habit he maintained even in winter so the shack would be ready if needed. His cold fingers fumbled with the matches, but he got one struck, got the kindling caught, and soon flames were licking up. He fed in larger pieces, leaving the stove door open for now to let the heat pour out faster. Next he grabbed every blanket in the shack, which was not many but better than nothing, and piled them over her. He pulled off her worn boots, alarmed to find her stockings had holes and her feet were ice cold. He stripped off his own coat and added it to the pile, then set about checking her more carefully. Her breathing was shallow, her skin still far too pale. But she was warming slightly, he thought, hoped. When he touched her cheek, it did not feel quite so much like touching marble. Jacob looked around the small space, taking inventory. There were basic supplies here, beans and coffee and flour, a few cans of vegetables, dried meat. And then he remembered the soup. 2 days ago, he had made a big pot of beef and vegetable soup, hearty and thick, and he had brought the leftovers out here to store in the cold. The pot was outside the door, buried in snow to keep it from freezing solid but cold enough to preserve it. Jacob retrieved it, shook off the snow, and set it on the stove to heat. While the soup warmed, he wet a cloth with water from his canteen and gently cleaned her face. Up close he could see she was actually quite beautiful, despite her condition. High cheekbones, a straight nose, full lips. Dark lashes lay against her pale cheeks. There was a small scar on her temple, an old one, and her hands, when he examined them, showed signs of hard work, calluses and small cuts. Who was she? How had she ended up out here alone, starving in the middle of winter? Wyoming territory was not kind to anyone, but it was especially harsh on women without protection, without resources. The closest town was Bridger Creek, 20 miles south. Had she come from there, been heading there? And why was she so thin? This was not a few days of hunger. This was weeks, maybe longer. The soup began to bubble and the rich smell filled the small shack. Jacob stirred it, checking the consistency. Still good. He ladled some into a tin cup, blew on it to cool it slightly, then returned to the cot. "Ma'am," he said, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed. "I need you to wake up now. I need you to drink something." She stirred slightly, a small crease appearing between her eyebrows. He tried again, louder. "Ma'am, open your eyes. Come on now." This time her eyelids fluttered and then slowly opened. Her eyes were brown, he saw, a deep warm brown that seemed too large in her thin face. They were unfocused at first, confused, and then they found him and widened with fear. "Easy," Jacob said quickly, holding up one hand. "You are safe. I found you outside, freezing. You are in a line shack on my ranch. My name is Jacob Morrison." She stared at him, her breath coming faster, and he could see her trying to process this, trying to decide if she was in danger. He understood. A strange man, an isolated cabin, her in a weakened state. He kept his voice calm and steady. "I have some soup here. You need to eat. When did you last have food?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She tried again. "I do not. I cannot." Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and broken. "That does not matter right now," Jacob said. "Right now you just need to drink this. Can you sit up?" She made an attempt, but she was too weak. Jacob slipped his arm behind her shoulders and lifted her carefully, propping her up against his chest. She felt fragile as a bird. He brought the cup to her lips. "Small sips," he instructed. "Not too fast or you will be sick." The first sip made her cough, but the second went down easier. He watched her throat work as she swallowed, saw the way her eyes closed as if in relief. He let her have 3 more small sips, then pulled the cup back. "Rest a moment," he said. "Then more." "Thank you," she whispered, and her eyes filled with tears that spilled over, tracking down her cheeks. "Thank you." Something in Jacob's chest twisted. "What is your name?" "Sarah." Another tear fell. "Sarah Bennett." "Well, Sarah Bennett, you are going to be all right. But you need to drink more of this soup and then you need to sleep. We can talk about everything else tomorrow." He gave her more soup, patient and careful, letting her take it at her own pace. She managed to drink about half the cup before she shook her head, unable to take more. Her stomach had probably shrunk, Jacob thought. They would have to build her strength back slowly. He laid her back down, tucked the blankets around her again. Her eyes were already drooping, exhaustion pulling her under. Within moments she was asleep, her breathing deeper and more regular than before. Jacob released a breath he had not realized he was holding. She would live. He was sure of it now. He ate some of the soup himself, not having realized how hungry he was, then banked the fire so it would burn steady through the night. The temperature in the shack was much better now, almost comfortable. He pulled the single chair over near the cot and settled into it, stretching his long legs out. He should sleep, but he found himself reluctant to close his eyes. What if her condition worsened? What if she needed something? So instead he sat there, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest, listening to the wind howl outside, and thought about the strange twist of fate that had put her in his path. Jacob had been riding back from checking on a string of fence line when he found her, a routine task he did every few weeks, even in winter. If he had gone a different day, a different route, he never would have seen her. She would have frozen to death out there under that cottonwood tree, and no one would have known until the spring thaw, if then. He studied her face in the firelight. Even in sleep she looked troubled, a small furrow between her brows, her lips pressed together. What had she been running from? Or toward? There had to be a story there, and probably not a happy one. The hours passed slowly. Jacob dozed off and on, but he never fully gave in to sleep. Each time Sarah stirred, he was instantly alert, watching to make sure she was all right. Around midnight she started to tremble, and he added more wood to the fire than his own bedroll over her blankets. At 2 in the morning she cried out, some nightmare gripping her, and he was at her side immediately, his hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, wake up, you are safe, it is just a dream." Her eyes flew open, wild and disoriented, and then she saw him and the panic faded. "Jacob," she whispered, remembering his name, and he felt absurdly pleased by that. "Are you in pain?" he asked. "Do you need more soup?" "Water," she managed. "Please." He helped her drink from the canteen, supporting her head, and this time she was a little stronger, able to help hold herself up. When she finished, she lay back with a sigh. "How long was I out there?" she asked. "I do not know. How long do you think?" "Hours. Since afternoon, maybe." "I was trying to reach Bridger Creek, but I got turned around in the snow, and then I was so tired and so cold, and I just needed to rest for a minute." Her voice broke. "I thought I was going to die." "You did not," Jacob said firmly, "and you are not going to." "But Sarah, you need to tell me what happened. Why were you out there alone? Where did you come from?" She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she would not answer. Then she spoke, her voice flat and exhausted. "I was traveling with a family, the Hendersons, from Kansas. They hired me as help for the wife, who was poorly. We were heading to Oregon, supposed to join a train in Fort Laramie, but we got a late start and then we got delayed, and by the time we reached Wyoming, the snows had started. We made it as far as a settlement called Red Fork, about 40 miles east of here, and the Hendersons decided to winter there. But you did not stay." Her jaw tightened. "Mr. Henderson decided he did not want to pay me for the winter since his wife was feeling better and they did not need as much help. He gave me $5 and told me I could find work in Bridger Creek." Her eyes opened, and they were hard now, angry. $5 and winter coming on and 20 miles to walk. Mrs. Henderson cried, but she did not stand up to him, so I left. Jacob felt his own anger rising. "You walked 20 miles in winter," I tried. "I had a little food, enough for a few days I thought, but it went faster than I expected, and the cold made me so hungry, and then there was a storm and I had to take shelter for 2 days, and by the time it passed my food was gone. I kept walking because what else could I do? But I got weaker and weaker, and today I just could not go any further." She looked at him, those brown eyes full of despair. "I have been hungry before, but never like that. Never so hungry that I felt like I was disappearing, like my body was eating itself. How long since you had a real meal?" "A week, maybe more. I lost track." Jacob wanted to ride to Red Fork and give Mr. Henderson a piece of his mind, possibly his fist. What kind of man sent a woman out into winter with no supplies, no protection? But that would have to wait. Right now Sarah needed care. "You are going to eat regular from now on," he said. "And you are going to stay here until you are strong enough to decide what you want to do next. I will not put you out, and I will not ask you for anything in return. You have my word on that." Sarah stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that?" "Because it is the right thing to do." Jacob stood, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her eyes. "Now you need to sleep more. I will be right here if you need anything." "You should sleep too," Sarah said. "You do not have to watch over me all night. I will sleep when I am sure you are out of danger." He returned to his chair, and she watched him for a long moment before her eyes drifted closed again. Within minutes, her breathing evened out into sleep. Jacob did not sleep. He sat there through the long, cold night, keeping the fire fed, listening to the wind and watching over Sarah Bennett. He did not fully understand the fierce protectiveness he felt toward this stranger, but he did not question it. All he knew was that he had found her, and now she was his responsibility and he would not fail her. Dawn came slowly, the darkness gradually giving way to a gray light that filtered through the single small window. The storm had passed, and though it was still bitter cold, the wind had died down. Jacob stood and stretched, his back protesting from the hours in the chair, and checked on Sarah. She was sleeping peacefully, color returning to her cheeks, her breathing steady and strong. He felt confident enough to step outside. His mare was in the small lean-to attached to the shack, and he grained her and made sure she had water. The world was white and pristine, untouched snow glittering in the weak morning light. Beautiful and deadly. When he came back inside, Sarah was awake watching him. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." Her voice was stronger today. "Did you really stay up all night?" "Mostly. I dozed a bit." "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did." He moved to the stove, stirred up the fire, and put the soup back on to warm. "How do you feel?" "Weak, but better." "Warmer." She pushed herself up on one elbow, a feat that clearly took effort. "I need to. Is there an outhouse?" "There is." Jacob helped her sit up fully, then swing her legs over the side of the cot. When she tried to stand, her legs buckled immediately and he caught her. "Easy. You have not used those muscles in a while." With his support, she made it outside and back, though by the time they returned she was shaking with exhaustion. He settled her back on the cot, and she looked frustrated with herself. "I am so weak," she said bitterly. "You are starved," Jacob corrected. "There is a difference. Your body needs fuel. Give it time and food and you will get your strength back." He fed her more soup, and this time she managed a full cup. He could see it helped, energy returning to her eyes. While she ate, he put together biscuits from the flour and some of the bacon grease he kept in a tin and set them to cook in a skillet on the stove. The smell made her stomach growl audibly and she flushed. "I am sorry. That was unladylike." "That was human," Jacob said, "and music to my ears." "It means your appetite is coming back." They ate the biscuits with some preserves, and Sarah closed her eyes in bliss. "This is the best thing I have ever tasted," she said. "It is just biscuits and jam. It is food, real food. You cannot know what that means." He could see tears threatening again and moved to distract her. "Tell me about yourself, Sarah Bennett. Where are you from originally?" She wiped her eyes and took a breath. "Pennsylvania, a little town outside Philadelphia. My father was a banker and my mother came from a good family. We had a nice life, or so I thought." "What happened?" "The bank failed. My father lost everything, all of his clients' money, all of our money. There was a scandal. He could not bear it." Her voice went flat. "He shot himself. My mother lasted 3 months after that, and then her heart gave out. The doctor said it was a defect, something she was born with, but I think she died of grief and shame." "I am sorry," Jacob said quietly. "How old were you?" 21. That was 3 years ago. We had nothing left. Everything was taken to pay debts. I had no family willing to take me in, or none that I would have gone to. So I found work as a governess, then a companion, then hired help. I have been moving west ever since, always thinking the next place would be better, but it never quite was. And now you are here. And now I am here." She looked at him directly. "You saved my life, Jacob Morrison. I will not forget that. You do not owe me anything." "I did not say I owed you. I said I would not forget." There was steel in her voice under the exhaustion, and Jacob found himself liking her even more. They spent the rest of the day in the shack, talking in fits and starts. Sarah slept a lot, her body demanding rest, but when she was awake they swapped stories. Jacob told her about growing up in Texas, coming north to Wyoming 5 years ago with his brother Nathaniel to start a ranch, building it from nothing into a modest but successful operation. He told her about Nathaniel marrying a woman named Clara and moving to Denver last year, leaving Jacob to run the ranch alone. He told her about the land, the cattle, the harsh winters and beautiful summers. Sarah listened, asking questions, and slowly he drew more of her story out as well. She had been educated, that was clear, speaking well and with knowledge of books and music and art. But she had adapted to hard work, learned to cook and clean, and so, things her privileged upbringing had not taught her. She was resilient, he realized. She had been knocked down repeatedly by life, but she kept getting back up. As the day faded into evening, Jacob made them a proper meal with beans and bacon and more biscuits. And Sarah ate with genuine appetite. She was sitting up on her own now, though still wrapped in blankets, and there was color in her face. "I should get you back to the main ranch house tomorrow," Jacob said. "It is more comfortable there and I have more supplies. You will recover faster." "I do not want to be a burden." "You are not. I have a house with 3 bedrooms and it is just me rattling around in it. You would actually be doing me a favor. It gets lonely out here in winter." Sarah studied him, those intelligent brown eyes seeing more than he was saying. "You are a good man, Jacob Morrison. Why is there no wife waiting for you at that house?" The question surprised him into honesty. "I was engaged once, back in Texas. Her name was Marion, but she decided she did not want to marry a man who was planning to leave everything behind and head north to Wyoming. She married a banker instead." He smiled without humor. "Probably a wise choice on her part, or a foolish one, depending on how you look at it. How do you figure she gave up a man who clearly has courage and determination and kindness for one who had money and status? Those things can be lost, character cannot." Jacob felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "That is a generous interpretation." "It is an honest one," Sarah yawned, covering her mouth. "I am sorry, I am still so tired." "Then sleep, we have all the time in the world." She settled back into the blankets, and within moments she was asleep again. Jacob cleaned up from dinner, tended the fire, and resumed his watch. He was tired himself, bone-deep weary, but he would stay awake one more night, just to be sure. But as he sat there in the quiet shack, listening to Sarah breathe and the fire crackle, Jacob felt something he had not felt in a long time, a sense of rightness, of purpose. He had spent the last year working hard and keeping to himself, building the ranch but building nothing else. Now here was this woman who had quite literally fallen into his life, and he could not shake the feeling that it meant something. He was not fool enough to call it love, not yet. He barely knew her. But there was something there, a pull, a connection. He wanted to know more about her. He wanted to see her healthy and strong. He wanted to hear her laugh. Jacob Morrison had always been a practical man, not given to flights of fancy. But as the night deepened and Sarah slept peacefully, he allowed himself to wonder what might happen if she stayed. If once she was recovered, she chose not to move on. If she found a reason to remain here in this harsh, beautiful land with him, it was a dangerous thought, and he pushed it away. She had just survived a terrible ordeal. The last thing she needed was him entertaining romantic notions. He would help her recover. He would give her a safe place to decide her next move, and he would respect whatever choice she made. But still, as he finally allowed himself to doze in the chair, he could not quite extinguish the small flame of hope that had kindled in his chest. Morning came again, clearer and brighter than the day before. Sarah woke looking even better, and she managed to stand on her own, though she was shaky. Jacob saddled his mare and helped Sarah mount, then swung up behind her. She leaned back against his chest, trusting him to keep her safe, and they made the 3-mile ride to the ranch house. The house was a solid structure, built of logs and stone, with a wide porch and a steep roof to shed snow. Smoke curled from the chimney, left over from the fire Jacob had banked before leaving 2 days ago. He helped Sarah down and into the house, and she looked around with visible appreciation. It was simple but well made, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and 3 smaller bedrooms off a hallway. There were rugs on the floor, curtains on the windows, furniture that was sturdy rather than fancy. A woman's touch was missing, but it was clean and organized and comfortable. "This is lovely," Sarah said. "It is home." Jacob guided her to one of the bedrooms, the one that had been meant for guests or children, though neither had yet materialized. "This will be yours for as long as you need it." The room had a real bed with a feather mattress, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the snowy fields. Sarah sat on the bed and nearly groaned with pleasure. "I have not slept in a real bed in weeks," she said. "The Hendersons had me sleep in a wagon." Jacob felt that anger rise again but pushed it down. "Well, this bed is yours now. Rest, and I will make us some food." She did rest, sleeping for several hours while Jacob went about the business of the ranch. He checked on the cattle in the near pastures, made sure the barn was secure, brought in more firewood. When he came back inside, he made a stew with venison and vegetables, letting it simmer slowly until the meat was tender. Sarah emerged from the bedroom looking more rested, and they ate together at the table. It felt strange and good to have someone else there, another voice, another presence. Jacob had not realized how much he missed simple companionship. "Tell me about the ranch," Sarah said. "How many acres?" "How many head of cattle?" 500 acres and about 200 head. "It is not huge, but it is enough for one man to manage with some hired help in summer. In winter it is just me, checking fences and making sure the cattle can get to water and shelter." "That is a lot of work for one person." "It is, but I do not mind hard work." "That is evident." Sarah paused, then said carefully, "Jacob, I need to talk to you about what happens next. I cannot stay here indefinitely without contributing something. It is not right. You need to recover first." "I know. But once I am stronger, I need to earn my keep. I can cook and clean, I can sew and mend, I can help with whatever you need." Jacob wanted to argue, but he could see the pride in her eyes, the need to not feel like a charity case. "All right," he said. "Once you are stronger, we will figure out an arrangement. But Sarah, I want to be clear. You are not obligated. If you decide you would rather move on to Bridger Creek or somewhere else, I will take you there and give you enough money to get started. No strings attached." "Why are you so kind?" she asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice, as if kindness was a foreign concept. "Because you deserve kindness. Everyone does." She blinked hard, fighting tears again, and changed the subject. "Tell me more about your brother, Nathaniel, you said. What is he like?" They talked through the evening, the conversation flowing easily. Jacob found himself laughing at her dry observations and wry humor, and she smiled more as the hours passed, the tension leaving her shoulders. When she finally went to bed, he lay in his own room and stared at the ceiling, marveling at how much had changed in just 2 days. The next week passed in a gentle rhythm. Sarah spent much of her time resting and eating, and Jacob could see her gaining strength daily. Color returned fully to her face, the hollows in her cheeks began to fill out, and she moved with more energy. She started helping around the house despite his protests, doing small tasks like washing dishes and folding laundry, and he had to admit it was nice to come in from the cold to find the house warm and a meal cooking. They fell into an easy partnership. Jacob would work outside during the day, and Sarah would manage the house. In the evenings, they would cook together, eat together, talk together. He told her stories about Texas and Wyoming, about cattle drives and wild horses and the vast open spaces he loved. She told him about Philadelphia society, about books she had read and music she had played, about dreams she had once had of seeing the ocean and the mountains and everything in between. "Have you seen mountains?" she asked one night. "The Wind River Range is not far from here. On a clear day you can see them from the high pasture. In summer they are incredible, snow-capped peaks against blue sky. I would like to see that." "Then you shall. When summer comes, I will take you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication, "when summer comes." As if it was a given she would still be here. Sarah looked at him, and something passed between them, an understanding, a possibility. "I would like that," she said quietly. Winter deepened. Snow fell frequently, piling high around the house, and the temperatures dropped brutal and low. Jacob was glad he had found Sarah when he did, because she never would have survived another night in that cold. Sometimes he thought about how close it had been, how easily he might have missed her, and it made his chest tight with an emotion he was not quite ready to name. One evening in mid-January, about 3 weeks after he had found her, they were sitting by the fire after dinner. Sarah was mending one of his shirts, her needle flashing in the firelight, and Jacob was oiling a saddle. It was domestic and peaceful, and he felt a contentment he had not known he was missing. "Jacob," Sarah said suddenly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever regret coming here? To Wyoming, I mean. Do you ever wish you had stayed in Texas?" He considered the question. "No. Texas was home for a long time, but it was not my future. I needed to build something of my own, and Nathaniel felt the same. Wyoming gave us that chance. Even though it meant leaving behind everything you knew, everyone, especially because of that. Sometimes you have to leave things behind to become who you are meant to be." He looked at her. "Why do you ask?" "I have been thinking about my own life. about how I have been running from place to place, always looking for somewhere better but never finding it. And I wonder if maybe I was looking for the wrong thing. What do you mean? She set down her mending. I was looking for security, for safety, for a position in a good household with kind employers and fair pay. But that is not what makes a home, is it? It is not about the place or the position. It is about the people. Jacob's heart started to beat faster. Sarah, let me finish. She looked at him directly, those brown eyes serious and clear. I have been here 3 weeks and I have felt more at home than I have in 3 years. You have given me more than just food and shelter, Jacob. You have given me respect and friendship and kindness. You have made me feel like a person again, not just a servant or a burden. And I want you to know that I am grateful for that, more than I can say. You do not need to be grateful. Yes, I do, but more than that, I need to be honest. She took a breath. I do not want to leave when spring comes. I want to stay here with you if you will have me. The words hung in the air between them, and Jacob felt his world shift on its axis. He had hoped, but he had not let himself truly believe that she might feel the same pull he did. Sarah, I need you to be sure, he said carefully. You have been through a terrible ordeal. You are still recovering. I do not want you to feel obligated or to make a decision based on gratitude. This is not gratitude. She stood, moved closer to him. Jacob, I have been falling in love with you, a little more each day, a little more with each conversation and each kindness and each moment we spend together. I know it is fast, I know it seems impossible, but it is true. Jacob stood as well, his heart pounding. You are falling in love with me. Yes, her voice was steady, sure. Are you going to tell me I am foolish? No. He reached out, cupped her face gently in his hands. I am going to tell you that I have been falling in love with you too. From the moment I saw you under that cottonwood tree, something in me knew. I know that sounds crazy. It does not sound crazy at all. He kissed her then, a soft, gentle kiss that held all the tenderness and hope he felt. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, and when they finally pulled apart they were both smiling. So you will stay? Jacob asked. I will stay. Sarah Bennett, will you marry me? She laughed, a sound of pure joy. That is very fast, Mr. Morrison. I know. But I also know that life is uncertain and time is precious, and when you find something real you should hold on to it. So I am asking, will you marry me? Yes, she kissed him again. Yes, I will marry you. They held each other close, swaying slightly in front of the fire, and Jacob felt a happiness so intense it was almost painful. He had come west looking for land and opportunity and independence. He had found all of that. But now he had found something more, something he had not even known he was looking for. He had found Sarah. They were married in February in the small church in Bridger Creek, with the pastor and his wife as witnesses. Sarah wore a dress that Jacob had bought for her in the town's general store, a simple blue wool that matched her eyes and fit her much better now that she had regained weight and health. Jacob wore his best shirt and pants and a string tie, and he had never felt more nervous or more certain in his life. When the pastor pronounced them man and wife, and Jacob kissed his bride, he felt like the luckiest man in Wyoming territory. They spent the rest of the winter in a golden haze of happiness. Sarah transformed the house into a real home, adding touches he never would have thought of, but that made all the difference. She sewed new curtains and quilts, rearranged furniture, planted herbs in pots on the windowsills. She cooked meals that made him groan with pleasure, using the supplies he brought from town and her own considerable skill. But more than that, she filled the house with laughter and conversation and warmth. Jacob would come in from a cold day of work to find her reading by the fire or kneading bread or humming while she worked, and it made everything worthwhile. At night they would lie together in the big bed, talking in the darkness or simply holding each other, and Jacob felt a peace he had never known. Tell me about your dreams, Sarah said one night. What do you want for the future? I want to expand the ranch, Jacob said. Get more land, more cattle, build something that will last, that could be passed down to our children. Our children, Sarah smiled. I like the sound of that. Do you want children? I do. I always have, but I thought that chance had passed me by. Now it seems possible again. She turned in his arms to face him. How many children do you want? As many as we are blessed with. 2, 3, 4. I grew up with just Nathaniel, and while I love my brother, I always wanted more siblings. I want a house full of noise and life. Then that is what we will have. Spring came slowly to Wyoming, the snow melting in fits and starts, the ground turning to mud before finally drying out. Jacob began the work of preparing for the year ahead, fixing fences and structures, planning which fields to use for what. Sarah planted a garden, digging in the dirt with enthusiasm, determined to grow vegetables and flowers both. In May, she told him she was pregnant. Jacob picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy, and she laughed and held on to him. They were going to be parents. The dream was becoming reality faster than he could have imagined. The pregnancy was easy, and Sarah bloomed with health. She kept working as much as Jacob would let her, though he tried to make her rest more. In summer, he took her up to the high pasture, just as he had promised, and they stood together looking at the Wind River Range, those magnificent peaks stark against the blue sky. "It is beautiful," Sarah breathed. "Thank you for showing me. Thank you for being here to see it with me." They hired help for the summer, 2 ranch hands who worked hard and kept to themselves. With their assistance, Jacob was able to spend more time with Sarah, and they took long walks together in the evenings, talking about names and plans and the future. She had never been happier, and neither had he. In October, Sarah went into labor. Jacob rode hellbent for Bridger Creek to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Patterson, and brought her back to the ranch. The labor was long and difficult, and Jacob spent the hours pacing and praying, terrified he would lose her, this woman who had become everything to him. But Sarah was strong, and she came through it. When Mrs. Patterson finally called him into the bedroom, Sarah was propped up in bed, exhausted but smiling, and in her arms was a tiny baby wrapped in a blanket. "It is a boy," Sarah said. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Jacob approached carefully, awed by the small life he had helped create. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, eyes closed, fists waving. "His son. What should we name him?" Jacob asked. "I was thinking Thomas, after my father, but with a better fate. Thomas Morrison." Jacob tried it out. "I like it." He sat on the edge of the bed and put his arm around Sarah, and together they looked at their son. Jacob felt a love so fierce it almost frightened him. He would protect this child and this woman with everything he had. They were his family, his purpose, his life. The months after Thomas's birth were chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. Jacob learned to change diapers and soothe a crying baby. Sarah nursed Thomas and sang to him, and somehow managed to keep the house running despite the lack of sleep. They were both bone-tired, but they were happy. Thomas grew quickly, a robust baby with his mother's brown eyes and his father's dark hair. He was curious and active, always wanting to see and touch everything. When he took his first steps at 10 months, Sarah cried with pride and Jacob clapped like Thomas had just done something miraculous. "He is going to be a handful," Sarah predicted. "He is going to be amazing," Jacob said. When Thomas was 18 months old, Sarah told Jacob she was pregnant again. This time they were more prepared, more confident. The pregnancy was even easier than the first, and in December of 1887, Sarah gave birth to a daughter. They named her Lily, and she was small and perfect, with wisps of blonde hair and blue eyes that would later turn hazel. Thomas was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to touch her gently and bring her toys. Jacob and Sarah watched their children together and marveled at what they had built. "You remember the night I found you?" Jacob asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. Thomas was playing in the yard, and Lily was asleep in Sarah's arms. "Of course I remember. I remember thinking I was going to die. I remember thinking you were already dead, and then seeing that breath in the air. That tiny sign of life. It was the luckiest moment of my life," Sarah said. "Even though I was half dead and frozen, even though I had nothing, I was lucky because you found me. I was lucky too. I did not know it then, but finding you changed everything." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have a good life, Jacob Morrison. We have the best life." And it was true. The ranch prospered over the years, growing from 200 head of cattle to 500, from 500 acres to 1,000. Jacob hired more help, and the operation became one of the most successful in the region. Sarah managed the house and the children with skill and love, and she also started keeping the ranch books, her education and intelligence proving invaluable. They had 2 more children, another boy named Daniel in 1889 and a girl named Rose in 1892. The house was indeed full of noise and life, just as Jacob had wanted, and he loved every chaotic moment of it. Thomas grew into a strong, capable boy who loved working with his father, learning to ride and rope and manage cattle. Lily was quieter but no less determined, with a gift for music that she got from her mother. Daniel was the comedian of the family, always making everyone laugh, and Rose was the baby, sweet and affectionate and utterly adored by her older siblings. Sarah and Jacob grew together over the years, their love deepening and maturing. They had arguments and disagreements, as all couples do, but they always worked through them. They supported each other through hard times, like the winter of 1893 when they lost a quarter of their herd to disease, and celebrated together through good times, like when Thomas won a blue ribbon at the county fair for his roping skills. In 1895, when Thomas was 10, Sarah found Jacob in the barn one day, looking thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "I was thinking about how different my life would be if I had not found you that night. If I had gone a different way or left the ranch an hour later, or if the snow had been falling harder and I could not see. But you did find me. That is what matters. I know. But Sarah, I want you to understand something. You did not just survive that night, you thrived. You built this life as much as I did. You made this house a home. You gave me children and love and purpose. I found you half dead in the snow, but you brought me to life." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Jacob Morrison, you are going to make me cry. Good tears, I hope." "The best tears." He pulled her close and kissed her, there in the barn with the smell of hay and horses around them, and it felt just as right as it had the first time. The years continued to pass. The children grew. Thomas fell in love with a rancher's daughter named Emma and married her when he was 22, bringing her to live on the ranch and learn the business. Lily went to Denver to study music and met a lawyer named Robert who adored her. Daniel took over the day-to-day operations of the ranch, proving to have a natural gift for managing livestock and people. And Rose, the baby, became a teacher in Bridger Creek, beloved by her students. Sarah and Jacob became grandparents, a role they embraced with joy. Thomas and Emma had 3 children, and Lily and Robert had 2, and the family gatherings became loud, chaotic, wonderful affairs. Jacob would watch his children and grandchildren together and feel a gratitude so profound it almost hurt. One evening in 1905, when Jacob was 55 and Sarah was 51, they sat on the porch together watching the sunset, just as they had so many times before. The house behind them was quiet, the children grown and gone, but it still held the echoes of all those years of life and love. "Do you have any regrets?" Sarah asked. "None," Jacob said immediately. "Not a single one. You? Only that I wish I could go back and tell that scared, starving girl under the cottonwood tree what was coming, that she was not dying, she was being reborn. That the best years of her life were ahead. She found out soon enough, she did." Sarah took his hand. "Jacob, thank you. For what? For stopping that day, for feeding me soup, for staying up all night, for asking me to marry you, for giving me this life. Sarah, you gave me just as much. More, probably. Then we are even. No." He turned to face her, this woman he loved more than life itself. "We are blessed." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, and Jacob thought about that winter night 21 years ago. He had been riding home in a snowstorm, cold and tired and alone. And then he had seen her, a broken figure against a tree, barely alive. He had given her soup and warmth and a place to recover. But in return, she had given him everything: a wife, a family, a home, a purpose. She had turned his house into a haven and his life into a journey worth taking. People in Bridger Creek still talked about the story sometimes, how Jacob Morrison had found a half-dead woman in the snow and married her. They said he was a hero, that he had saved her life. But Jacob knew the truth. They had saved each other. The ranch continued to thrive under Daniel's management, and Jacob eased into a comfortable semi-retirement, still helping out but no longer carrying the weight of responsibility. Sarah spent her days with her garden and her books, and she wrote letters to her children and grandchildren, long, detailed letters full of love and advice and family news. In 1910, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a huge party at the ranch. All 4 children came with their families, and friends from all over the territory attended. There was music and dancing and food, and Jacob danced with Sarah under the stars, holding her close, remembering the first time he had held her when she was half frozen and barely alive. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," he told her. "You are a terrible liar, Jacob Morrison. I have never lied to you. Then you need spectacles." But she was smiling, and she kissed him, and he did not need spectacles to know that she was everything he wanted. They grew older together, their hair turning gray, their movements slower, but their love never diminishing. Jacob would wake in the morning and look at Sarah sleeping beside him and feel the same rush of gratitude and wonder he had felt 20 years earlier. She was his miracle, his gift, his partner in every way that mattered. In 1918, when the great influenza swept the nation, it touched their family as well. Daniel's wife became ill, and Sarah went to help nurse her, refusing to stay away despite the danger. She and Jacob worked around the clock caring for their daughter-in-law and their 3 young grandchildren who also fell sick. All of them recovered, but the experience left Jacob shaken. He realized how fragile life was, how quickly it could be taken. He held Sarah closer after that, treasured every moment, every conversation, every shared glance. "We are not young anymore," Sarah said one day. "We should talk about the future." "What about it? The ranch, the children, what we want?" They had long conversations over the next weeks, making plans and arrangements. They decided to officially transfer ownership of the ranch to Daniel, who had been running it for years anyway. They set up trusts for all the children and grandchildren. They made sure everything was in order. "Why does this feel like we are preparing to die?" Jacob asked. "Because we are, not today, not tomorrow, but someday, and I want to be ready. I want to know that our family will be taken care of." "They will be, you have made sure of that." In 1920, they traveled to Denver to visit Lily and her family. It was a grand adventure, taking the train and staying in a hotel, and they loved seeing the city and spending time with their daughter and her husband and children. But they were glad to return to Wyoming, to the ranch, to the wide open spaces they loved. "I do not think I could ever live anywhere else," Sarah said as they rode home in the wagon Daniel had brought to the train station. "Neither could I. This is home." They settled back into their routines, and the years continued their steady march. Jacob's joints ached more, and Sarah's eyesight dimmed, but they adapted. They spent their days working in the garden, reading to each other, playing with grandchildren who visited, and sitting on the porch watching the sunsets. One evening in 1925, when Jacob was 75 and Sarah was 71, they sat in their usual spot on the porch. The sunset was particularly beautiful, streaks of pink and orange and purple across the vast sky. "Jacob," Sarah said quietly, "if I go first, I need you to promise me something. Do not talk like that. Hush. Listen, if I go first, I need you to keep living, keep working in the garden. Keep spending time with the children and grandchildren. Keep watching these sunsets. Do not give up, Sarah. Promise me." "I promise, but you have to promise me the same thing." "I do." They sat in silence for a while, holding hands. Then Sarah said, "Do you ever think about that night? The night you found me, all the time. What do you think about? I think about how close we came to missing each other. How one small change in our lives would have been completely different. I think about how grateful I am that I rode that way at that time and that I saw you. I think about how you trusted me, a stranger, and how that trust grew into everything we have now. I think about those things too. And I think about how you fed me soup and stayed up all night watching over me. I think about how safe I felt, even in my weakest moment, because you were there. I will always be here, Sarah. I know, but of course, no one lives forever. In the winter of 1927, Sarah caught a cold that turned into pneumonia. The doctor came from Bridger Creek and did what he could, but she was 73 and her body was tired. Jacob sat by her bedside, holding her hand, talking to her, begging her to fight. Their children came, all four of them, with their spouses and older children. The house was full again, but this time the noise was muted, worried, sad. They took turns sitting with Sarah, telling her they loved her, thanking her for everything she had given them. On a bright, cold morning in January, Sarah squeezed Jacob's hand and opened her eyes. "I love you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved me," Jacob said, tears streaming down his face. "You saved me, Sarah. Then we are even." She smiled, that beautiful smile he had fallen in love with 43 years earlier. "I will be waiting for you. Do not take too long. I will be there before you know it." She closed her eyes and slipped away, peaceful and calm, and Jacob held her until she was gone. The grief was crushing, unbearable, a physical pain in his chest. But he had promised her he would keep living, and so he did. He spent the spring and summer in a haze, going through the motions of life. His children worried about him, but he assured them he was fine. And slowly he began to heal. Not to forget, never to forget, but to remember with joy rather than only pain. He worked in Sarah's garden, tending the flowers and vegetables she had loved. He played with his great-grandchildren who were starting to be born now. He sat on the porch every evening and watched the sunset, and he talked to Sarah as if she was there beside him. "I miss you," he would say, "but I am keeping my promise. I am still here, still living, still loving this life you helped me build." In the fall of 1928, on the anniversary of the day they met, Jacob took a ride out to the cottonwood tree where he had found her. It was still there, old and gnarled, leaves turning gold in the autumn light. He stood there for a long time, remembering, a woman half dead from hunger and cold, a man who stopped to help, soup and blankets and a vigil through the long night, and from that, a love that had lasted a lifetime. "Thank you," Jacob said aloud, to Sarah, to God, to fate, to whatever force had brought them together. "Thank you for her. Thank you for all of it." He lived 5 more years, dying peacefully in his sleep in 1933 at the age of 83. His children found him in the morning, a smile on his face, and they knew he had gone to be with Sarah. They buried him beside her in the cemetery in Bridger Creek, under a pair of headstones that read Jacob Morrison, 1850 to 1933. Beloved husband, father, grandfather Sarah Morrison, 1854 to 1927. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations. Thomas's children ran it, and then their children, and it remained a testament to what Jacob and Sarah had built together. The house stood solid and strong, sheltering new families, new lives, new love stories. And sometimes, on cold winter evenings when the snow fell and the wind howled, people swore they could see 2 figures on the porch, sitting close together, watching the sunset. A tall man with dark hair and a gentle smile, a slender woman with brown eyes and a musical laugh. Gone but never forgotten, their love still echoing through the home they had made. In Bridger Creek, the story became legend. The cowboy who found a dying woman in the snow and married her. The love that grew from a single act of kindness. Parents told it to their children, and those children told it to theirs. A reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, even in the darkest moments, hope and love could survive and thrive. Because Jacob had stopped that winter day. Because he had fed Sarah soup and stayed up all night. Because she had chosen to stay and he had asked her to marry him and they had built a life together that mattered. It was a simple story, really, but it was everything. A testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the miracle of two souls finding each other against all odds in the vast wild beauty of Wyoming territory in 1884. And that love, born in a snow-covered cottonwood grove and nurtured through decades of laughter and tears, work and rest, struggle and triumph, that love endured. In the stories told, in the family that continued, in the ranch that still stood, in the memory of all who knew them. Jacob Morrison and Sarah Bennett Morrison. A cowboy and the woman he saved. A love story for the ages, begun on the coldest night and lasting through eternity.